everyone. Welcome back. Sorry if you heard that loud sound. Welcome back to the Monday Morning Murder Podcast. I am Erin, aka Faye Fire, and we are here today to discuss Season 2, Episode 5 of House of the Dragon, titled Regent. And this was, it was kind of a low-key episode, let's be real. It was a pretty mellow, but, we had some big changes happen and some weird, interesting kind of revelations. I don't know if we call them. I just think they're kind of weird, weird things that happen. So yeah, we're going to talk about all of it. And I hope that you all enjoyed the episode. Let me know your thoughts. And if you're here in the live chat, drop a hey, hello. Nice to see you. Happy Monday. And hopefully everyone has had their coffee already. I've got mine. So yeah, it was kind of an odd episode. Let's be real. Aemond has become the regent because of his actions against his own brother. And there's weird things happening with Daemon, but there are a lot of Daemon-Aemond parallels going on in this episode, which, that's my favorite. That's my bread and butter. And so I was happy to see it all. Kind of a crazy episode to start out with. We're kind of dealing with the aftermath of Rook's Rest, and we have the scene of Meleys's head being rolled through the city, courtesy of the new hand, Kristen Cole. And, it just didn't hit the same way as Jaehaerys's funeral. So I don't think Kristen has the, I don't know. He doesn't have the same, he's not putting on the same vibe as a Hightower funeral procession, I guess, when you're rolling a stinking, dead dragon head through the streets with flies all around it and people are starving. So it's kind of not the same vibe. It's not the same. Rhaenys is dead. We didn't actually see her body, so I don't know if at a later point we will see her being interred or having a sort of funeral, for herself, or her bones being interred at Dragonstone, which is a tradition of the Targaryens. Still unclear about all of that, but so the head was rolled through the city, and Gawain was of course, the first person to call out Kristen for this and just say, this is not a victory. This is what we call a Pyrrhic victory, which means the price of the victory is so high that you have to wonder, was it worth it? Do we consider this a victory? We've lost so much. And Aegon is following the dragon head. He's in a covered wagon, and no one can see it. No one can see inside of it. And they take him up into the Red Keep, into his chambers, and the maesters get to work on him, and his armor is just melted into his flesh. And that was as it was written in the book as well. And so a lot of the trauma that he suffers is actually just removing that from his body. And in the book, I believe it was his chainmail was melted into his flesh, which, I don't know, better or worse than the full plate? I don't know. Sounds pretty awful. Thankfully, he was unconscious for the whole thing. And so he must be in a coma of some kind. He had broken bones reset and just burns and wounds all over his body. In the book, it is said that he refuses to, or no one else was allowed in there except for his mother. Now, granted, I would assume he probably, just as we saw, he gets his wounds treated and this kind of thing. And then from there, only Alicent is in to see him. And that is, kind of a role that she is accustomed to. There are so many huge parallels with Aegon and his injuries to his father, Viserys, and kind of how he looked at the end of his life, sort of things falling apart. He had a broken, what was it, his leg or his arm? I think it was his leg. And his face is really burned, and even one of his eyes is fused like burned shut. And if you guys watched my most recent video that came out this past week, you will understand why that is really significant. We'll get into that and talk about that a little bit more. If you haven't watched my newest video, if one of my mods wants to drop it in the chat, it's called An Eye for an Eye, and it's all about Daemon and Aemond and kind of their mythology and the power of the eye and its connection to kingship in mythology. So it's something we've talked about several times in our live streams here. So if you are new to the live stream, welcome. If you're not subscribed already, definitely hit that subscribe button, like the video. And we do a lot about House of the Dragon, A Song of Ice and Fire, and even a little show called Yellow Jackets. So, all right. So the significance of Meleys's head being paraded through the city is, you know, they're parading that this is the largest dragon that the Blacks have. And her head is massive. And it was interesting. We saw that scene with Hugh Hammer and who I presume is maybe his assistant, his blacksmith's assistant or something of that nature. And he's like, I thought the dragons were gods. And Hugh says, it's just meat. And that has like multiple contexts because it's almost like, well, there's this sort of Christ-like aspect to that where, you know, the consuming of the body of Christ sort of thing, because these people are starving. They're desperate. We saw in, I think it was episode 2, Hugh's wife had said that she had paid 3 times the price of a normal chicken. She had to walk all over town all day. And we saw at the beginning of this episode, the oranges are getting moldy. You know, their food stores are rotting and they're not keeping, and they're unable to get new food in because of the blockade in the gullet, which is courtesy of the Blacks and the Velaryons. So people are getting desperate. A lot of people are fleeing the city. And once they kind of get word of that, Aemond decides to close the gates so no one else can leave the city. But anyways, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But the dragons, you know, he says they're meat. And when there's starving people, there's hungry people, and there's, you know, meat on parade. It's almost like a let them eat cake sort of thing. There's the seeds of unrest are definitely being sown. Another interesting thing that I thought was worth pointing out about Vhagar. Okay, so Vhagar killed Rhaenys Targaryen, but she also killed Laena Velaryon, which was her former rider. And she also killed Lucerys Velaryon, Rhaenyra's son. So, like, she's almost like a Velaryon Bane is kind of what I was thinking in my mind. I was like, she's just like killing all the Velaryons. It's pretty incredible. It's just kind of a coincidence, but I thought about it this week and I was like, this is, like Corlys, we see him, he's in disbelief about Rhaenys' death. And he's of course heartbroken over the situation. And he's angry at Rhaenyra, but also like you should be angry at Vhagar. Let's be real. Like Vhagar sucks. She is really ruining your life, Corlys. You know, there's so many of your family members are dead because of this one dragon. She is the largest and most fierce dragon alive and all of this, but one would think it might make you a little extra gung-ho about fighting against her or something. But Corlys is so heartbroken. He's a little relinquished to his grief at this point in time, and that's something that he kind of struggles with. You know, he loved Rhaenys so much, and I love that moment with him and Baela where, you know, she says this was all for her, and she was, you know, she's a Targaryen princess, and he is a highborn noble, but he's not a Targaryen, and so. And despite the fact that they're both Valyrian households, it's just like the Targaryens are set apart in a sense. So, all right. So let me get caught up with the chat. Hello to everyone who's here. Good morning. Happy Monday. We've got Mrs. Duncan the Tall. We've got Milt, the Westerosi Ninja. We've got Forrest Blurta. We've got Wild Marjoram here. I think I saw Carl. We have Mary Giannone. Ooh, I like it. Nice Italian girl. Lady Starfall, nice to see you. The Imagination Realm. Thank you guys. It's good to see you all here. Thank you for being here on your Monday morning to talk about this. And let me know your thoughts in the chat, how you felt about this episode. If you have any questions, let me know like what your favorite things were. Hello, Karina. Nice to see you. We are going to kind of break it up into, we'll talk about the greens, then we'll talk about the blacks, and then we will talk about what's going on at Harrenhal is kind of my plan, if that works for you guys. So, all right, so let's get into this. So we've got the food shortage going on. We kind of talked about that. With Hugh Hammer, his wife, they have been pretty loyal to the Greens. Hugh is doing this blacksmith work, which he's essentially been forced to do, but hasn't been paid for yet. And of course, it was Aegon who promised him pay. And now Aegon is injured, and it seems pretty unlikely that the other members of the council or even Aemond are planning to kind of stick to that. Aegon really presented himself. I love this, their brand of politics that they're kind of individually practicing. When we see Aegon being sort of communal, yes, we need, the small folk are the most important to our cause kind of thing. Or, and then Otto is against that. And then I loved the moment with Jace. I was like, okay, Jace is based. We have based Jace, hashtag based Jace, when he's like, oh, the histories are written to, gild us in glory or whatever. I loved that. So yeah, we get to see little peeks of their individual politics. And Aemond is actually terrifying. And Alicent definitely realized that. So we've had okay, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. Okay, so the parade is coming through. We have this scene of Alicent and Aemond kind of standing above, watching the parade happening. And Alicent notices that Aemond has the dagger in his belt, the cat's paw dagger, or Aegon's dagger, I guess. I don't know what we're officially calling it. But anyways, so she immediately realizes that something is off. Something is not, we're not getting all the details here, what's going on. And Aemond seems really stoic, really unemotional, in fact, sort of proud as he stands there with his mother. And she's just kind of looking at him in kind of horror. And Alicent has repeatedly said throughout this season that what he is, what he's become about Aemond. So she believes that he's kind of a monster. She's starting to believe that about him, and that there's this fury, or as Rhaenyra had said, the darkness he keeps sheathed inside of himself, or what have you. And I think the same goes for Aemond. He definitely has that darkness within him, and his own mother can see it. So yeah, for real. So let's see. So, and then as they go into the chambers where Aegon is, where the maesters are working on him, Alicent is just kind of watching over and in a lot of concern, as a mother should. And Aemond just kind of waltzes in, and he's looking over, and, before he says anything, it's just, well, somebody's going to have to serve while he's injured. He's not concerned. And again, Alicent immediately notices this. And so she knows that she's not getting the full story. The whole scene with Aegon is really horrifying. And of course, as a mother, despite her inability to be, very emotional or show a lot of emotions to her children, you can see that she's really concerned about Aegon in that moment. And she's dealt with this kind of thing before with Viserys. He was ill for so long, for half of Alicent's life. She was caring for this older man. So yeah. But Aemond, he's not concerned. He's got his own priorities. He's got plans. Then Then we have the scene with Alicent, and she goes to speak to Kristen Cole to find out more of what has happened, and he won't really tell her. And that's a really interesting thing when she asks him what of Aemond, and he's like, I can't say. That was a little bit scary because he's clearly lying. He saw some. Now, granted, he was unconscious for a good portion of that battle, but to say that he didn't see anything, especially when we saw that scene at the end of that episode, at the end of Rook's Rest, where Aemond is sort of approaching Aegon with his sword in hand, and you're like, what's going to happen here? So Kristen, I don't know if they're kind of acting out of fear or if they truly feel like Aemond is the one with the most experience, maybe because he is so like battle ready, and like he has Vhagar. She is the most valuable, largest weapon that they have, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's the best leader for them. Granted, he is well learned, he's studied and that kind of thing, but he also is vindictive. He is vengeful. He wants retribution for what happened to him as a child. Like, he just has this massive chip on his shoulder that he's walking through life with. And what's it going to take to resolve that? To, you know, get past that? Because haven't you gotten your licks in? Haven't you gotten your payback? You got Vhagar, like going way back to it, like you still got Vhagar. And he even says in that moment, he says, it was a fair exchange. Don't mourn me, mother. It was a fair exchange. I may have lost an eye, but I gained a dragon. So, like, I don't know. It's just interesting that he has this chip on his shoulder, and it's so violent. It's terrifying. And Alicent is afraid of him. And so when they do go into the small council meeting, and that, you know, Alicent is saying, oh, I would be the best to serve as regent. I've already done it. I did it for Viserys for years. She's got a point. She is experienced. She's got experience for the job. Her father was Otto Hightower. He was the hand of the king for 3 kings. And, you know, she's grown up around that. So she is intelligent, but it goes back to the fact that she is a woman, which is the exact reason they usurped the throne from Rhaenyra. So they can't, as Lara said, we can't present you as regent, a woman, when we are trying to take the throne from Rhaenyra because she's a woman. Like, it's just not it doesn't work. It doesn't, that's bad PR. And that's what the Hightowers are all about, is their PR game. But Alicent, while she may be the most qualified for the job, she can't take it because she is a woman. And this was what Rhaenys warned her about. This is what Rhaenyra warned her about. This is what Rhaenyra's whole life is. And so we have this moment where Alicent is sitting there, and the slow zoom on Alicent in that moment is such a parallel to season 1 in, I think it was episode 5, where Kristen is confessing his indiscretion with Rhaenyra to Alicent, and the camera slow zooms in on her as he's sitting there making his confession. So here in this episode, actually, here we go, another parallel, episode 5. We did this with episode 3 and like kind of the mythical aspects of the story. So yeah, we have this slow zoom in on Alicent as she's like having this insane realization that all the things that she believed or that she had worked so hard for are kind of crumbling beneath her. And that was exactly what happened in season 1, episode 5. So she now has to contend with the fact that she is sort of made a monster, which is Aemond. She recognizes that he's a monster, but she can't do anything about it. And especially now the fact that she's a woman, she's even less powerful. She had a modicum of power while she was married to Viserys and Viserys was alive. Her voice mattered at that point in time. And this was very similar to what happened to Cersei Lannister when her children, you know, in Game of Thrones, when her children were ruling and she was serving as regent because they were too young. And then eventually her children all died. And so she was like, okay, well, and this is the change, like where Cersei said, no, never mind, I'm going to take the crown. Alicent, she well, she didn't choose to do that, but there are some parallels there. There's some similarities. So yeah, it's interesting. And she turns to Laris and she turns to Kristen, these men that she has made a pawn with, pawned her own body, her own flesh to these men in order to uh have them have her back, or so she thought. But when the time when it really comes down to the moment, both of them reject her. They both leave her in the dust. So she's feeling so mortified over her own behavior, over the men around her. She's just disgusted with them. This disgust that's been building for Kristen Cole over the last couple of episodes, like it's just kind of boiling over. We see her almost have like a panic attack in that moment. She's breathing really hard and she's trying to hold it together. But you can see like she's just feeling like so defeated, and all the truths that Rhaenyra had said to her, that Rhaenys had said to her, all of those things that she fought against, they're becoming true. They're becoming her reality right before her eyes. So it's pretty delicious to watch in a sense. So yeah. One thing I did want to point out, we had the scene of Kristen like cleaning his sword and he's using lemon and salt. And then later in the episode, Alicent approaches him, she confronts him and she says, what the heck? Why did you, like, I know there's something more going on. You're not telling me. And you abandoned me in the small council. What am I supposed to think right now? Like, are you truly abandoning me? And Kristen, I think that the scene of him cleaning his sword, he's using lemon and salt. He's not using a whetstone. He's actually like cleaning it. Like that's like a disinfectant, those two things, lemon and salt. He's disinfecting the sword. This is so phallic of him because he and Alicent have been having this sinful relationship with each other. And then in that later scene, he's essentially breaking up with her, even though she's already like disgusted with him. But he's like, look, we've already given this war to the dragon, so we have to be led by a dragon. What we have to do is disgusting, and he doesn't want her to he believes that he's sparing her from the horrors of what they're about to do. And she's like, well, I never asked to be spared, and I never asked for you to call me by my name, which was like, oh, dang, girl. But it was like a breakup moment. So when he's cleaning his sword, like with a cleansing, like, agent, I guess you might say, like lemon and salt, versus just using a whetstone to sharpen it, there's something about that. He's cleansing away their relationship, the sin, all of that between he and Alicent, versus just cleaning his sword. I just thought that was really symbolic. Let me know what you guys think. But yeah, so going back to Alicent, talking about Aemond and what he is or what he's become, she believes that he's like kind of a monster. And my mind instantly went to Ewan Mitchell, who plays Aemond. He had spoken several times about how he kind of he studied Cyclops in Greek mythology to kind of prepare himself for the role of Aemond, who has the one eye. And that came to mind as Alicent is repeatedly saying what he's become, what he is, because he is like a monster in a sense to her. And of course, his mother is going to recognize that. And he has kind of a weird, like, Madonna horror complex with his mother and Sylvie at the brothel kind of going on anyways. But, Cyclops is abandoned to an island. He lives on an island, and I think there's other Cyclops who live there, but like in the Odyssey, Odysseus and his men, they end up there on the island. And so there's just kind of like this idea, because of Aemond's death and the God's Eye Lake and all of this kind of stuff, it's all interconnected. But I feel like there is that monstrous aspect is really coming out of him in these episodes. And even Helena, we have the moment of Helena. Hey, are you guys Helena subscribers? Let me know in the chat. Helena plus Aemond equals love. equals maybe Jaehaerys and Jaehaera. I don't know. I made a little video about it. It's my most viewed video. So so if you guys get a chance to check it out, do so if you haven't already. But we did have a Aemond reunion. I hope we get more. There's this idea, like, if you're a Aemond subscriber, which of course I am, or I like kind of just enjoy the idea of it. Wouldn't it be like prudent of Aemond, like, let's say Aegon dies, okay? And this is kind of like very Holmgang. This is Aemond is Holmganging. He tried to kill Aegon and he wants to steal his wife. And he stole his house. He stole his throne. So there's like some Holmgang Viking stuff going on here. And so Aemond is in the throne room. He's staring at the throne. This was like a very used scene in the trailers of the sort of stormy background, the lightning flashing, and Aemond in the dark throne room staring at the Iron Throne and all the swords around it. And it's a dark moment. And if we going back to Eye for an Eye, Aemond, he is associated with Horus. He's also associated with the moon. And so he's when it's nighttime, when it's dark and that kind of thing, that's when Aemond is more in his element, versus Daemon, who is associated with the sun and the daytime and like fire and heat and light. And we see that in this episode too, but we'll get to that later. But so here Aemond is really like in his power. Like, this is his power moment. And then of course Helaena comes up behind him, his prophetess woman, and she's like, was it worth the price? Was it worth trying to kill your brother? Like, what do you want to get about this? I saw somebody tweet on Twitter this morning that there was a scene from the trailer for next week where Aemond is like in Aegon's face and Aegon's like, like all comatose or whatever. And someone tweeted, he's telling Aegon that he effed his wife on the Iron Throne last night. And I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, so I don't know. We'll see if we get some more Aemond crumbs. I'm here for all of it and I love every moment of it. So yeah. All right. So, you guys, I'm so sorry if you're hearing background noise. Like, my husband is so annoying. He literally just came home and started cleaning out his truck right outside my window where I'm trying to stream. I'm like, go away. So, I'm sorry. Anyways, okay, Polyphemus is the name of the Cyclops in the Odyssey. He is a son of Poseidon and Thusa. Interesting. Which, that's interesting because Poseidon is called the Earth Shaker. He is associated with like earthquakes. He is like the sea god and like the god of like the water and rivers and that kind of thing. But he is associated with like earthquakes and like storms and that kind of thing. And that's kind of connecting to Aemond as well, being like with his Horus aspect. But then as a Cyclops as well. So, all right. Let me just get caught up in the chat here for a minute. And thank you guys for being here, for watching. Appreciate it. All right. The only reason she had any power before is because Vizzy T allowed it. Good point. Vizzy T looking better every day as the wackos are taking over. Exactly, and that's what Massaria says too. She's like, the people whisper that when Viserys was alive, there was peace in the realm. And that's what Rhaenyra has been sort of advocating for. She doesn't want to go to war. She's been the one resisting the violence and that kind of thing. It's been Kristen and his small army that have been traveling through the Riverland or through the Crown Lands, and committing violence and committing atrocities and murdering lords who refuse to bend the knee, versus Rhaenyra, who the only act of war she kind of came forth with, well, granted the whole Jaehaerys thing, that whole thing, but that wasn't necessarily Rhaenyra, and that whatever. Daemon is anyways, but but that was not an act of outright war. It's not like she's traveling to these different holdfasts and murdering lords and slaughtering their armies or anything like that, the way that the Greens have been doing. Daemon went to Harrenhal himself with Caraxes, and he's trying to claim it himself, versus the Greens, who are forcing conscription through the crown lands, and if these men or the lords resist, then they will kill the lords and kill the next one until somebody bends the knee. And it's kind of like Alice pointed out, she's hearing the weeping of these people, and we're going to get into all of that, but she does talk about, like, do you want men who are forced to serve you to be the ones serving you? Because they're not going to be loyal. So okay, let's see. I don't think Helena and Aemond equal Jaehaerys and Jaehaera. He doesn't act as if they were his children, but maybe Aemond plus Helena equals Maelor. Maelor does not exist yet, but maybe he will. Good point. Good point. I like that one. And yeah, it makes it a little bit interesting. Helena being sort of the shared wife, I guess. It's sort of an inversion of Aegon the Conqueror and his wives. Okay. Poseidon was the god of sea and earthquakes, patron god of Troy. His animal was the horse, which is why they left one as a gift. And, he actually has strong associations with King Arthur himself, which is something I talked about in my Pendragon cycle videos. But yeah, Poseidon is associated with King Arthur, and King Arthur heavily influences this story and what's going on with Daemon and Aemond and everything at Harrenhal. So that's interesting. I love these conversations. I love them when we make these connections here, guys. It just, it's just awesome. Not enough time between now and what happens later for Helena to birth Maelor. Yeah, it's interesting because I think there is a little bit of a time jump or, kind of thing that goes on because, like, at a certain point, like, Aemond is gone with Alice for a while. I think there is, like, some time progression, and it should be interesting to see how they handle that with Aegon the Younger and Viserys, because they are younger than how old they are in the books. They're only toddlers in the show. But I think they're like, I always envisioned Aegon being like maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years old in the show, or I mean, in the book, excuse me. So I could be wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of, yeah, it should be interesting because of how cognizant he is in the book. It should be interesting that they're like kind of lowering the age. I would like to see what the reason for that is. Yeah, the timeline may be adjusted a little bit and Maelor could fit in. Yeah, we'll see what happens. So, all right. So I think, let me see. Let me drop in this link for you guys. If you didn't get a chance to watch the Eye for an Eye video I did this week, I just want to make sure you've got it here. I worked really hard on it. So, and it didn't get a lot of views. So if you guys want to check it out, definitely do. All right. So let's move on and we will get into Team Black and what happened here. And they were kind of busy this episode. We've got a lot going on. So first and foremost, we did meet Lady Jane Eyre in the Vale. So Rhaena, Aegon, Viserys, and Joffrey were sent to the Vale. And they also sent 2 dragons. They sent Caraxes and Stormcloud, which are Joffrey and Aegon's dragons. And Lady Jane, she's not entirely thrilled with how small the dragons are. She says she has hunting hounds who are more fearsome. So she's a little dissatisfied, not to mention she sent, Rhaenyra sent a gaggle of kids up to her. So more mouths to feed in a place where, it's not the most, they don't, there's not a lot of food growing in the Eyrie. Like, it's up in the top of the mountains. It's just not a very lush place. I think actually they have a lot of trouble growing any plants up there at all. So all of their food is carted up, or, they have the like a winch like thing situation where they will like pull people up. So that's how they get food. But so it is a little bit inconvenient to have 4 extra children sent to you, more mouths to feed, plus a couple of dragons. Plus you have to figure out how to keep them happy and warm, because, the top of a mountain is not conducive to the environment that dragons like. So she's going to have to, figure out ways to keep them warm, keep them comfortable, and sort of, hidden away. So, she's not that happy. Now, can I point out, I'm very happy to see Lady Jane Eyre. She is played by Amanda Collin, who is an incredible actress. She played Mother in a series called Raised by Wolves, and Father in Raised by Wolves actually is also in House of the Dragon, and he plays Alan of Hull. So I'm just so happy to see both of them back. And even though Jane Eyre was not very happy this week, I am happy to see her. And of course, it's really nice to see the Eyrie again, because it's such a beautiful place. We had those beautiful windows, and just the little details. Like, the Eyrie is just a very beautiful place. It's one of the most beautiful castles, in my opinion. So, yes, Mother. Yes, I was so happy to see her. I've just been waiting. So I can't wait to see what they're going to do with her character. It's a small role, but she's a great actress. So hopefully they will flesh it out a bit and give her some things to do. Okay. So back on Dragonstone, the men are just, they're war hungry. They are ready to strike back, especially after Meleys and Rhaenys' death. Like, that is a really valuable thing. Like I said, Meleys is the largest dragon on the Blacks. She's the oldest dragon on Team Black. And her, like, the loss of Meleys is a big problem. Now we only have Thyrax, Caraxes, Moondancer, and Vermax, who are basically fighting ready dragons. But they still do have a lot of dragons on Dragonstone, so they just don't have enough riders. So this is a little bit of a problem. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So the men are ready to go. They feel like now is the time to strike back as revenge against the Greens for Meleys. They believe that Vhagar is weak and tired right now after the battle, so now would be the best time to strike. But the only dragon that they really have there who would be even barely capable of getting to that point of fighting back would be Syrax. And that would mean that Rhaenyra would have to go out, and they can't send her out. She is the regent. She is the queen. So she is the sovereign, as she puts it. And that word is important. So she's feeling frustrated. She's feeling stuck and complacent because she can't go fight. She also doesn't really know how to fight. She points that out. She's like, I wasn't taught how to fight. I was not a boy. I didn't have a sword thrust into my hand from, infancy, and I wasn't taught to fight. I was a cupbearer for my father in a time of peace for many generations. Like a couple, like 80 years of peace she inherited. So she's kind of trying to figure out, and the men are like, oh, well, you don't even know how to fight. You're a woman. And she's like, well, you've literally never fought in my life, because my father kept a peaceful kingdom. So you're no more battle experience than I am. So just cut it. But they are, she's afraid that they're going to start to think she's weak or inferior and perhaps turn against her. She talks to Mysaria about these concerns. And one thing that I really loved in this scene is that in the background, we had this sort of detached room from the study, which I presume is kind of like Rhaenyra's study, chambers, what have you. And there's this detached room with a dragon skull in it. I don't know which dragon it is. It's obviously going to be one of the Targaryen, like, ancient dragons. It wasn't Balerion because he's beneath the Red Keep, which is where he's, I mean, they never made a point to say we moved Balerion's skull to Dragonstone. So this has to be one of the older Targaryen dragons, perhaps. So when Daenys and the other Targaryens came from Valyria, they had 5 dragons with them. And I don't think it could be Meraxes' skull because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe her bones were sent back from Dorne. I could be wrong. I could be wrong on that. If someone in the chat wants to double check that for me. So it's a potential it could be Meraxes' bones. What's really interesting about this, and I talked about this in my my Dreamfire video that I did, Helena and Dreamfire, is that the bones, I believe the bones have power and they even still possess the power of prophecy. So what we talked about is Balerion, the day that Daenys the Dreamer had her fateful dream of the doom of Valyria was the very same day that she claimed Balerion. So my theory is that Balerion inspired these dreams in her and also in Aegon, because 5 Targaryen riders, or 5 Targaryens rode Balerion. 3 of them are confirmed to be dreamers. That would be Daenys, Aegon the Conqueror, Viserys, which is Rhaenyra's father. And then we also had Maegor and Arya were riders of Balerion. We have no record of if they were also dreamers, but I definitely suspect that they were. So we have these bones that are at Dragonstone. So to continue that, there were dreamers, there were dragon dreamers beyond these characters and obviously beyond Balerion's death, but we have later characters such as Daeron the Drunkard, or even Daenerys herself. Well, Daenerys, she has dragons, but anyway, and she has the black dragon, which I think is like the key to the dreamer aspect. But anyhow, these bones being present beneath the Red Keep, because they were kept in the Red Keep and even in the throne room until Robert Baratheon's rule, which is in, a Game of Thrones. So Robert Baratheon is the one who finally cleared out the dragon skulls, had them interred beneath the Red Keep and kept down there. So my theory is kind of that those bones still contain all of that prophetic power, the prophetic ability. Even Viserys, he kind of holds vigil around Balerion's bones. He's trying to get that dream back. He lights all the candles around it. So it's very like sort of an ancestral ritual kind of thing going on. And so what these bones are that are in Rhaenyra's study, that's a really good question. Is this some special dragon? What power do these bones put off? Melisandre also says, the power of bones, the bones remember. And she's referring just to human bones. So imagine the power of dragon bones, that they have to be incredibly powerful to commune with. So those are just my thoughts, but I don't know which dragon it is. Okay. So Pendragon Skywalker says Meraxes' skull was returned to Aegon by a peace delegation from Dorne. Perfect. So perhaps that was Meraxes' skull in there. So that's interesting. We don't know if Meraxes is a dreamer. Rhaenys, she the thing is that Aegon was the dreamer. It's Aegon's dream, right? I do speculate like maybe it was one of the other women, but the thing with Balerion and Daenys, which just recently that information just came out, kind of confirms more so that Aegon was probably the dreamer. But again, if proximity can allow the dreams to occur, then perhaps Rhaenys or Visenya were also the dreamer. And we see like this Visenya focus by Rhaenyra. She's reading the old history. She's trying to learn as much as she can about Visenya. And when Jace even questions her, he's like, are you like, I hope you're not trying to be like her. And Rhaenyra's like, and why not? Why shouldn't I be? Because because Visenya was fierce and she lived a long time. She outlived her brother and sister. She was a very powerful warrior. She rode Vhagar, who still is the largest dragon. And so maybe studying Visenya is a good way to combat Vhagar or combat Aemond and Vhagar, because perhaps she can learn something, learn a weakness or something of that nature of Vhagar, or something that she can use to her advantage. All right, so let me know your guys' thoughts on that. Do you think it's Meraxes? I think the chat here is mostly speculating that this is Meraxes' skull. So, all right. Okay. So, Rhaenyra, she's speaking to Mysaria. Mysaria is, she's really taken on the role of Master of Whispers for Rhaenyra, whether she's officially given her that title or not. Mysaria, she's not going to the small council meetings or anything like that. Like, Rhaenyra really is only speaking to her in private, which is interesting. But clearly Mysaria still has her connections back in King's Landing, and she's still in contact with people there. And she shares with Rhaenyra's like feeling very frustrated. She doesn't know what to do. And Mysaria is like, well, there are whispers in King's Landing that, the people were happier under your father's rule because there was no war. So don't feel like you not fighting makes you a weaker ruler. It actually makes you a desirable ruler to the people. And so they kind of work out a plan to use the whispers to their advantage, get the people talking, start spreading these rumors to gain favor for Rhaenyra and to disfavor the Hightowers, which shouldn't be difficult at this point because people are, hungry people. It doesn't take long for them to turn against their leader. When you're being, this almost sounds familiar. When you're being like priced out of your life, people will turn against their leaders. Seems applicable. Just saying. But yeah. So Mysaria encourages her to trust her subjects, trust the process, trust the whispers, and she sends Elinda, Rhaenyra's handmaid, Elinda Massey, into King's Landing, probably with, a pocket full of secrets. And Elinda seeks out Diana, who is working at the tavern. I think it's called the Coxswain or something like that. And so she seeks her out, and they're gonna cook up some rumor mill situation over there. So that's pretty fun. I like it. I like the Diana connection. I love to see Diana doing whatever, get her payback however she needs to do it. And hopefully she doesn't end up paying like a terrible price for this, but because bless her heart, she deserves the best. Okay. And not only that, Rhaenyra decides, this is a little funny. She decides to send Sir Alfred Broom, who has kind of been her biggest naysayer in the council meetings. Like he trusts Rhaenyra. He's very loyal to Rhaenyra and her cause. And he even says in this scene, he would never abandon her, like, while he lives. He'll never abandon her claim, her cause, or anything of that nature. So she decides to send him to Harrenhal to meet up with Daemon and just kind of find out like what's going on. And this is so funny because I was just like, this is so like third grade. Like, listen, can you go talk to my boyfriend and like find out why he's mad? And, can you just tell him like, can you just go talk to him for me, please? I'm just dying. Like, really, Rhaenyra? Really? But yeah, so that's kind of the plan. She's sending him to go talk to Daemon to kind of smooth feathers, but also to find out like what is he doing? He's been gone for a long time. We haven't heard anything. Is he actually raising a host for me, or is he raising a host for himself? Like, I need to know these things. And Sir Alfred's like, he would never, he wouldn't dare. And Rhaenyra's like, have you ever known him to lack for daring? Like, she's seen Daemon pull some crap before in her time. Like, let's think about in season 1 where Viserys dismissed him from court. And then he went to Dragonstone and pouted for like 6 months and pretended that he had gotten Massaria pregnant and that he was going to give her a dragon's egg. And then Rhaenyra was the one who had to come over there and be like, stop being a baby. Like, literally, just stop it. And so it's kind of funny that whole dynamic was really funny to me. But she does need to know the information. And not only that, Jace has decided that he's going to leave as well and go to the Riverlands. So he decides he's going to go to Harrenhal, and Baela's like, you're crazy. Like, do you really think that you're going to be able to reason with my father? And I love the scene between Jace and Baela because they are so reminiscent of Daemon and Laena. Because if you've noticed throughout this season, Jace really has embodied a lot of Daemon characteristics. Like his mannerisms are similar. He admires his stepfather for his power, which, hey, that could have gone a lot differently, especially at Jace's age and kind of the things he's gone through in his life. So it is good to see that he admires Daemon and that he respects him and he wants to emulate him. And clearly he sees that his mother feels the same, that she respects Daemon, and they're all kind of one big happy family, a very awkward, incestuous family. But yeah, he really embodies sort of Daemon's characteristics. And then see, I even call her Laena. Baela in the scene, she looks exactly like Laena. Like, she really does. Her hair is down. She's just beautiful, regal, and she just really looks exactly like her mother. And it's heartbreaking. Like, these two in this scene, it was just like a callback to Daemon and Laena and kind of what we didn't get, what we were cost in the series, because we really didn't get a lot of their relationship together. And it was a very huge part of Daemon's life and even Rhaenyra's life, because Rhaenyra and Laena were very close. And the three of them would, because they didn't live in Pentos. Daemon and Laena lived on Driftmark, and Rhaenyra and Laenor lived on Dragonstone, and the three of them would hang out, fly their dragons. They had all this, beautiful times together. Rhaenyra was fond and more than fond of her, of Lady Laena, and who was also Laenor's twin sister. Laenor was still kind of doing his own thing, his own gay man thing. And but Laena and Rhaenyra and Daemon were all really close. And Syrax was laying a lot of eggs during this time. They'd fly back and forth between Driftmark and Dragonstone. And it was just this kind of very romantic three heads of the dragon life that they had together. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just beautiful. And Baela and Jace really have a good, strong relationship. And she kind of convinces him, she's like, look, you're going to have to figure out a different way to serve. You're not going to be able to work my father if your mom can't do it. So he decides he's going to go treat with the Freys and see if he can secure the crossing because the Freys live at the Twins, which are two towers on either side of the river, and the bridge that connects them, they have control over it. They are the bridge trolls, and nobody crosses unless they give their permission. And it's like this whole thing. They're very entitled people. So they have a meeting because Jace had made the arrangement with Cregan Stark to have the Winter Wolves come down to assist Rhaenyra to serve her. And he wants to make sure that the crossing is secured so that they can get across easily. But when he goes to treat with them, and it's great because we get a nice shot of Vermax, who is growing, it seems, and beautiful coloring. I love it. And Jace, basically the Freys they tell him that, well, if you will give us Harrenhal after the war is over, if we can take control over Harrenhal, then, you can have the crossing, right? And Jace says, well, if I'm going to give you Harrenhal, you're going to definitely need to do more than just let us cross. So he secures them for Rhaenyra, it seems, in exchange for Harrenhal, which is a pretty crazy move. Let's be real. Like, they already control a major crossing in King's Landing that connects north to south, because the neck gets really hairy. It's very like mucky. It's where the Crannog men live. It's all mud. Like, the mud will just swallow you up. You can't just, go off-roading there. If you don't cross at the bridge, the river's really dangerous. You could die trying to cross the bridge. So there's just all these risks. So the twins are a really powerful location strategically. And then Harrenhal, as I've discussed in a video dedicated to this idea, is that Harrenhal is the most strategic place in all of King's Land, in all of Westeros, because it goes right along the King's Road. It's the key to the Riverlands. It opens up to the Riverlands. It's the largest castle in the realm. It can hold garrisons of men, like hold a host of men and armies and that kind of thing within its castle walls. So it's a really powerful location, and both Aemond and Daemon strategically wanted that before anything else. That was like their first and foremost goal. And they each had their individual ideas of how to take it. So I guess Jace makes this deal. We don't see any, like signing papers or something, but he tells Rhaenyra that they're going to give Harrenhal to the Freys after the war, presumably. Okay. Because so Larys Strong is the Lord of Harrenhal, but he transferred all of his wealth out of there once he became whatever, in King's Landing. After his family died, he transferred the wealth of Harrenhal. So they're pretty broke over there. It's just kind of like the a few sparse people living there. So they really don't have a force to kind of hold it and defend it. So if the Freys showed up and they had an army or a small force of men to say, hey, Rhaenyra's men granted this to us, like, what are you going to do? They wouldn't have much to defend themselves with. However, it's such a huge castle, it's like, try and find them, right? So yeah. So Rhaenyra, she is feeling the pressure, and she realizes that she needs dragons to kind of fill the void of that Rhaenys left behind, and to just combat Vhagar and Aemond, and especially now that Aemond is in power. So they had the idea of the dragon seeds, and the dragon seeds are illegitimate or sometimes legitimate offspring of Targaryens who have married into other families, or they maybe, like I said, illegitimate children, and a lot of them live on Dragonstone or around in King's Landing, that kind of thing. We've met Ulf the White, who says that he is the illegitimate brother of Viserys and Daemon from their father Balon. We've also, Hugh Hammer comes into play. We can see he's got blonde hair. So we're going to see like what his story is, what they come up with for that. But yeah, so we've got a couple of the dragon seeds at play. And we also even saw that moment with Adam of Hull back in episode 3, I want to say, where sea smoke was flying overhead and he was like, really interested. So we've got a few of the dragon seeds that we've already met on hand. And that should be something that we're going to get into next week, but seeing if anyone is able to claim a dragon. And who is also not able to claim a dragon. Should be really interesting. The dragon seed is planted. All right. So, and then finally, so Corlys, he's in mourning. We hear this like beautiful story between Baela and Rhaenyra about Rhaenys claiming Meleys, which is such a great story. I love this. I love hearing these, these little anecdotes and that kind of thing. But So Meleys was formerly written by Alyssa Targaryen, which is Daemon and Viserys's mother, excuse me, father, their mother. And she was, we also got to see her this episode, interestingly. But she kind of, Alyssa is a very unique Targaryen. She is noted for having mismatched color eyes. She had one blue eye, one purple eye, the purple Valyrian eyes. She also had more golden blonde hair versus the white blonde hair. And she was kind of a tomboy. She was just like a really like rough and tumble kind of chick. When Viserys and Daemon were infants, she took both of them flying on Meleys when they were really tiny babies. Despite protests of the people around her, they were like, what? But I love to think that that kind of like got that ferocious spirit into Daemon in particular. But so yeah, so we hear this great story that Rhaenys, you know, it's very similar to what happened with Aemond claiming Vhagar, okay? Because when Aemond claimed Vhagar, Vhagar was formerly written by Laena Velaryon, which is the mother of Baela and Rhaena, okay? So they're at her funeral and Aemond goes and claims Vhagar. And Rhaena, she didn't have a dragon at this point, so she's kind of in her mind, she's probably presuming that she is going to claim Vhagar or sort of inherit Vhagar in a sense, but that's really not how it works with dragons. And so Aemond goes and he claims the dragon and Vhagar accepts him. And Rhaena is extremely bitter about this, but that's not how it works. And this kind of same story goes for Daemon with Meleys, because Daemon also, much like Aegon or Aemond, did not claim a dragon until he was older. And so when his mother, Alyssa, died and she had written Meleys, and you know, this whole like line of like, it's a shame you didn't know your mother. Well, Daemon did know his mother. Like, she died when he was a little bit older. She died in childbirth, giving birth to her third child, which was a daughter. But anyways, so after she had died, Rhaenys claimed Meleys. And it was the same kind of thing for Daemon, where he thought that he would be the one that would inherit his mother's dragon. You know, he didn't have a dragon yet. He presumed that he would inherit his mother's. But turns out, no, Rhaenys snuck in. She could see in the dark, they say, and she snuck in and she claimed Meleys. And it's such a great story because it exposes so much about Daemon and just another level of parallels between Daemon and Aemond, and their, you know, just their shared dynamic, the Daemon dynamic. So yeah, and we'll get into more of Alyssa momentarily, but we see this, you know, this, everybody's mourning the loss of Rhaenys. Baela is really heartbroken. You know, Baela grew up with Rhaenys. She was basically a second mother to her. So after Laena died, Baela stayed on Driftmark and lived with her grandmother. And even Corlys left after Laena had died. That's when he left for 6 years on his ship, went off to, you know, fight and adventure and this kind of thing. And had only recently returned when he was injured, right? At the end of season 1 that we saw. So, of course, his, you know, instinct is to just run away again. That's Corlys for you. That's how he deals with his problems. I guess he just gets on a ship and runs away, much like Laenor did and desired to do. But he also really loved Rhaenys. They had this beautiful romance. Rhaenys, you know, she's a Targaryen princess, but she chose to be with Corlys, who was not royalty. And she could have married more strategically, but she chose him. And that is beautiful because it still unites the Valyrian blood and gives this important position to the Velaryons, despite the fact that they're not Targaryens, they're not dragon riders. But all Valyrians, I mean, if you're considering the Targaryens to be closer to gods than men, like, what does that make the Velaryons? You know, they may not be dragon riders, but they also came from Valyria. And I think it was Vaemond who said that their family is even more ancient than the Targaryens. So there's, you know, this dynamic between them of, and they also have shared blood intermarried for so long that it's like they're all kind of almost, you know, one family. But anyhow, but yeah, so Corlys, you know, Bela goes and she is taking him the Hand of the King title, which Rhaenyra had offered to him. And Corlys, he's bitter about Rhaenys. He, you know, it's interesting. He's angry at Rhaenyra, which you can't blame him. I mean, she has cost a lot from their family in his time. You know, Laenor is presumably dead. Laena is dead, although that really had nothing to do with Rhaenyra. That was just unfortunate circumstances. But he's just kind of got these, he's dwelling on his bitter feelings. He's like searching for bitter feelings to have towards Rhaenyra, rather than directing those, as I said, at Vhagar, who actually is the weapon that's killed so many in his family. But Bela, you know, she goes and she talks to him, kind of gives him a pep talk, and she reminds him that Rhaenys was a Targaryen and she was blood of the dragon. She is fire and blood. And she died in the way that she wanted to, just like Laena did, and just like Bela says that she wants to as well. And Corlys offers her to be his heir. And that's something that Rhaenys had really wanted for them to do, was to name Bela as their heir, because she had always been loyal to their family. After her mother died, she stayed in Driftmark. She grew up with Rhaenys and she learned from her. But she feels like she is fire and blood. She embodies her Targaryen side, and she feels somebody else would be more deserving than she would. And that's really noble of her to like humbly decline, right? I don't know how you guys felt about that, but I thought it was such a beautiful scene. Heartbroken Corlys is like, oh, just a handsome, handsome, beautiful man. And just really tragic scenery. And just, yeah, it was just beautiful scenes. All right, so let me get caught up and then we'll move on to Harrenhal. I think that pretty much covers it. 14 black over here. Yeah. Okay. Let me catch up in the chat here with you guys. Thank you to everyone who is here watching with us live. All right, the twins looked great, much larger and more epic than I imagined them to be. The way they shot the scene with the mirrored perspectives with the towers in the background was great. Yeah, I really liked it. It was really beautiful. Rhaenys was in many fights during the conquest. I'm not saying she was the best model, but she was still strong, inspiring queen. Very true. Okay. I don't know. Busy T and Rhaenyra suffer from the curse of Aenys the First. Well, you know, his Aenys. He was a gentle spirit, okay, and he suffered from tummy issues. Jaehaerys the First was really the perfect blend of Aenys and Maegor. Kind of, sort of. I don't think he had much Maegor in him personally. I think he really went against that. He had some ferocity, but I think he so strongly resisted his, you know, any association with Maegor that he was just his own man, in my opinion, because he did make nice with the Faith of the Seven so much, in contrast to what Maegor had done. He was trying to sort of repair what Maegor had done. But he let it go a little too far. And now we have this situation. How do you convince someone to go up to a massive dragon to try and charm them? Don't worry, you'll be fine. Maybe. Go ahead, give it a try. Hey, some people are very daring. I don't know. Some people like to like skydive and stuff. I am not that person. I don't think I could approach a dragon either. Hey, AK, nice to see you. Bela gave him the best nah, bruh, ever. Exactly. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. So, and now we're going to get into the stuff happening at Harrenhal. My favorite. it got a little weird. So, first and foremost, we have Daemon in his buddy comedy with Willem Blackwood. They are trying to, they've got their plan to try and persuade the Brackens to serve Rhaenyra versus the Greens, which they're clearly, they've sworn for. And even in the face of Caraxes, who is a dragon, I mean, this is a small group of men, maybe like 10 or 15 men in the face of a dragon, like he's right there. And they say, no, we're not going to bend the knee. That's not who we are. So there's some real stubbornness in them and some real, they're dedicated, like they're not going to be persuaded. And Daemon was like, wow, actually, those are the kind of men I actually need to have on my side, because they're not going to be, they're not going to sway. And so they decide they'd rather be burned than bend the knee. So, Daemon obliges. He kind of has to. I mean, what are you going to do? Let him go and just say, oh, whatever. No, he kind of had to burn them. But so he and Willem kind of come up with a plan. Daemon's like, look, there are things that the crown cannot be seen to do, but you need to get them to bend the knee. So the Blackwoods send their men in and they start committing some barbarity. They start, claiming women and children and kicking down doors and murdering people and taking hostages and saying, if you don't serve Rhaenyra, then like we're gonna like kill your family, kind of thing. And so Alice later points out to him, like, are these really the men that you want serving you under duress? Like, you can't force loyalty in anyone, and if they don't willingly serve you, then like you're forcing them, and so you can't trust those men. So it's not a great situation. We have Daemon in the classic line of, I did not think they'd be so eager to die. So back at Harrenhal, Daemon is still suffering from his strange dreams, and it's getting a little weird. I love the dream sequences. I love this. Like, I really love how much it's messing with Daemon, and I love the little details we're getting because we're learning so much about his psyche and about the things that weigh heavily on him. One thing back in season 1 in episode 3, when Daemon is fighting against the crab feeder, and he's having that epic battle in the Stepstones, and there's this shot of Daemon with an arrow, like just narrowly misses striking him in the heel of his foot. And so I drew a lot of comparisons in that scene to him and Achilles back in season 1 when we talked about it. But what I kind of equated with Daemon as his Achilles heel is he has an Achilles heel for women. Like, that's his thing. Whether it's his wives, it's like the idea of the 3 heads of the dragon. And I think that's really why he's haunted so much by Rhaenyra and by Laena, despite other reasons, but like he wants to recreate the 3 heads of the dragon. And so we see this again in this episode. Laena is haunting him. That's his Achilles heel. But then it also comes out, like, what's his core wounding? It's his mother. And so we have this parallel with Aemond and Aemond's own mommy issues, which we've seen him exploring throughout the season with the brothel madame that he is so fond of. Both of these men clearly have like mommy issues, Madonna whore complex situation, where they can't really differentiate, or and this could be a byproduct of Targaryen like incest practices, right? Because they can't really differentiate between motherly love and like romantic love or sexual love, right? And that's part of the Madonna whore complex. Okay. So anyhow, Daemon, I actually feel like he's trying to not sleep, especially after this. We see later in the dream, but he starts dreaming of this blonde Targaryen woman. She's saying all kinds of things to him. He's the finest swordsman. He's the most fearless dragon rider. He's having kind of like sexual thoughts and dreams about her. And then she comes out with the my favorite son, if only you'd been born first. Really interesting stuff. So it's Alyssa, he's apparently being haunted by his own mother. Yeah. And so this kind of his core wounding is the fact that he was not born first. He's not the firstborn. He's never been entitled, and he's going through this episode saying, well, you should call me the king. It's unnecessary to call me king consort. So his wounding is that loss of kingship, the loss of being heir. He calls himself Viserys's first true heir. So he's just so clung on to this. And Alice is really exploiting this or exposing this wounding with whatever sort of, and it may not be Alice, it may just be the weirwood that he is sleeping upon, but Alice definitely is having some influence here. Perhaps it was the potion, the potential weirwood paste or weirwood tea that she had him drink in episode 4 that's perhaps just unlocked these abilities to have these weird dreams, right? So it's interesting. It's getting a little crazy. And, we have the transition for when he wakes up and he's sitting at the dinner table and he keeps having these moments where he's like blacking out. We go from the dream sequence to him waking up in this situation where he has no recollection of how he got there or what happened leading up to it. So it's kind of interesting. Is he blacking out? Is he losing time? Or is he like daydreaming these sequences? It's kind of interesting to figure out where it's coming from. And I love the shot, like when they cut to him coming to from the dream sequence, the food he's eating. Oh, do you like the duck? We also have goose. And it's blood dripping into the mashed potatoes, which are very like seedy looking, we might say. So again, there's like this parallel of like the weirwood paste, the dragon seed, witches stealing your seed, all of this. There's kind of the trope of witches wanting to steal your semen or whatever. So it's just kind of funny. I don't know if you guys watch what we do in the shadows. That's where that joke comes from. But yeah, so is it like she's stealing his seed? He's having these like sexual dreams. Is she like, I don't know, is there some exchange going on? I don't know. But also, is she poisoning the food? Daemon doesn't know what to do. He's like, I don't want to sleep. I don't want to eat. I need to repair this place. It is going to drive him crazy. Like he's going to be driven a little bit crazy, just as Larys said that he would. But it's fun to watch. So Daemon decides he really needs to repair Harrenhal, get it built up, get it back to a functional state. He says there's going to be a large host of men that are going to be arriving here soon. Sir Simon is like, well, we have no coin. Like, we have no money at all. But Daemon refuses to ask Rhaenyra for any sort of help. So he decides to just fix it himself, I guess. He's going to DIY Harrenhal. Doesn't sound like a smart idea. So we see him starting to repair things, using an axe, fixing the place up, doing what he can. It's going to take a lifetime and then some. So pretty interesting. Yeah, Fear and Loathing near the Isle of Faces. Fear and Loathing of construction of Harrenhal. I saw, I think it was Gray Area had mentioned that they're using Daemon's time in Harrenhal as they're inspired by The Shining is what they were saying. And I really love that connection. There's the axe, the just him being driven crazy by this place, like slowly. I just think it's a really great like parallel there. Loved it. So And of course, Damon, hey, I'm the kind of gal that appreciates a construction kind of man. So I love watching him work. Hey, I could take more of this. I'm enjoying it. But he's got blisters on his hands. And even though he's a fierce warrior and stuff, you can tell this is not his normal kind of work. Alice, she's watching him. And I would like to point out, as she's watching him from above, as he's working down in like the center hall or what have you, she's standing behind that stone balcony, and it's all flowers in the stone. That's like the design of flowers. So we talked about last week Alice being associated with the goddess Bloodwith, who was called Flower Face, and she is also cursed to be an owl. And so I was reading a little bit more. I have this great book called Avalon Within, and it has a lot of different stuff about the goddesses associated with Avalon, Bloodoweth being one of them. And they talk about her, and remember last week on the live stream we talked about the parallels with Persephone and Demeter and Hades and the underworld, and like kind of the purple that's associated with Harrenhal and like the Eleusinian mysteries, which are also associated with the color purple. I was having some more thoughts about this because Bloodoweth is she's an owl goddess, cursed as an owl, but she's also made of flowers, and she is called Flower Face. And in the book I was reading, they're talking about how she kind of has this dual aspect where in the daytime she is a flower face, like springtime goddess, and then by night she is the owl huntress, right? So just like Persephone is the goddess of spring, but she spends a third of the year in the underworld with Hades as his queen. There's this duality, the spring goddess by day, but owl, dark huntress goddess by night, right? So are we seeing this? Are we getting more of the underworld symbolism with Alice in this scenes? Okay, just saying, like it's there. She can hear the voices of the people, mourning and weeping as they're being assaulted. She says she can hear the cries of women and children from Brackenland, from Stonehenge and Lambswold and Mori. And she can hear what she hears on the wind, cries of anguish. And Damon is like, yeah, well, war is terrible. Like these things happen. But Alice is like, this isn't war. This is crimes against the innocent. And so clearly, like she's hearing the aftermath of like the actions of the Blackwoods who are, committing atrocities on behalf of Damon in order to try and get more men. And she's like, is this really, the men that you want serving you, the men under duress? And then we later have the other river lords who come in and they confront Damon, and they are saying how the Blackwoods are destroying kind of their sacred places that are associated with the old gods, and they're desecrating their sacred lands and things like that. And so I want to bring up the idea. I've talked about this in many of my videos and in my live streams, but sovereignty goddesses, and even Rhaenyra refers to herself as the sovereign, okay? Sovereignty goddesses are associated with the land. They are a goddess of the land. They are a representation of the land. So in ancient Celtic mythology, you have the kings who are often warrior kings. And the reason for that, and then they are married to like the queen of the land or the goddess, okay? And they have goddess rituals. They're like sex rituals that take place on certain days of the year. This is a very Avalonian King Arthur concept with like the Lady of the Lake. So let's look at it through that lens. So King Arthur is a warrior god or warrior king of Britain, right? The Pendragon in title. How did he gain that title? Well, the sovereignty goddess bestowed it upon him. So these men are tested in certain ways or go through a certain ritual with Arthur For example, it was the running of the stag. So he had to defeat the stag king, which is the sort of leader, the king stag, basically. So the strongest deer on the isle, on Dragon Isle. Okay. And so there's the herds of deer, the ones with the, largest rack, the largest antlers, and that kind of thing. King Arthur had to, sorry, children. He had to defeat the Stag King by hand. He was not allowed to take a weapon or anything. So what he did, he's disguised himself as a deer. He wears deer fur. He wears fake antlers. This is reminiscent of the Isle of Faces, the green men who are said to have antlers. And so what he does is he poses as a deer. He defeats the Stag King by hand. And therefore, he is the chosen Pendragon, right? He proves himself to be worthy of that title. And Uther had done the same. And, through various tests or whatever, how it ever presents itself. Now, the Lady of the Lake, the Lady of Avalon, the High Priestess of Avalon, she acts as the sovereignty queen. She acts as the Lady of the Lake, which is actually the sovereignty goddess of Avalon and of Britain. Okay. So let's think of Monty Python, shimmering white samite, and she thrusts the sword, at King Arthur and that kind of thing. That is the sovereignty goddess. She is the embodiment of the land, okay? And so when she chooses her king, her stag king, he is the protector of the land, and they have a sacred marriage. So they are devoted, dedicated to each other. And the king may have a queen. He may have a wife who is the queen, but he is also married to the land, and that is his sacred duty. It's kind of a complicated relationship, but what I'm seeing here with Alice is that she is that. She is the sovereignty goddess of the land. And I also want to point out in season 1, Rhaenyra, when she sees the white stag, that is her form. That is her initiation or her, testing right there. Kristen wanted to kill the stag, and all the men wanted to kill the white stag. But what did the hunter, the master hunter guy, say to Viserys? He said, before the dragons were kings in this land, the white stag was the symbol of kingship. The white stag presents himself to Rhaenyra in season 1. And so that's how we know that she is actually the sovereignty queen versus the sovereignty king, right? But anyway, so she is the sovereignty queen. But if Daemon is her husband, what's the husband of the queen? Well, he's the king consort. But so he has to kind of get his own sacred initiation, which Alice is giving him. But it's got a lot of Arthurian overtones. And then we have this layer of competition of well, is he raising an army for me, or is he raising an army for himself, kind of thing. There's a lot of layers to it. It's kind of complicated, but let me know in the chat. Are you guys with me? Are you understanding? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? It's a complicated concept, and the Lady of the Lake is not the only sovereignty queen. We even talked about last week with Saint Winifred, these saints or these goddesses who are associated with certain streams or rivers or that kind of thing too. Springs, sacred springs, and that kind of thing. Persephone also, because the spring, she is the spring. Okay. Anyways. Why is this my favorite thing to talk about, guys? All right. So, yes, exactly. The bridegroom of Christ. Yes, exactly. I love it. So yes, exactly. A God's wife, I think they call those. So I believe Alice is a sovereignty goddess. She is sort of this otherworldly figure. There's the potential that she is a very ancient person. She's sort of this ageless individual. Nobody really knows where she came from or how old she is. They say she's potentially Sir Lionel's illegitimate daughter, but then they also say that she may have been the wet nurse to Sir Lionel. So it's difficult to know where her true origins lie. And that's what makes her so interesting, because we can kind of speculate on these things. And especially when she's throwing out oh, I'm a barn owl, and and then the layers of things that are associated with that make it even more interesting to read into. So, and that's what I'm here for. If you guys are into like mythology and that kind of thing, this is my jam. So, all right. So, yes, the white stag reminds me of Nat in Yellow Jackets. Now she is queen. Exactly. So, Natalie in Yellow Jackets, she saw the white moose is who presented himself to her. And the white moose is kind of an equivalent of the white stag in indigenous cultures. White animals in general are typically a good omen or like a special omen in indigenous cultures. And we see it like with white buffalo, white moose, white deer, white stags, Okay, the white elk is the land, and the land chose Rhaenyra. Exactly. So now kind of Daemon has to go through his own initiation process because Daemon and Rhaenyra are so equal to each other. They are, two halves of a whole. And I talk about that in my Eye for an Eye video about their like their power. They are two halves of a whole. Like the Eye of Ra is associated with both male and female power, right? And so it's a female source of inspiration, of creativity, versus the male force is the violent aspect, right? So we kind of see that balance with Daemon and Rhaenyra for sure. And that moment where after the River Lords come and they sort of confront Daemon and say, we wouldn't bend our knee to a tyrant. And then Daemon goes over and he stares into the fire. And then it cuts to Rhaenyra as the opposite angle. She's staring into the fire. That was like their moment, their Eye of Ra moment, like where they're understanding. And again, that's a parallel to Aemond, which happened, in the throne room earlier in the episode. So, okay. So there's a lot to it. Okay. I do think that when Alice says to him, when she points out, it's a pity that you never knew your mother, I think that's another hint as to her identity being a sovereignty goddess, because the sovereignty goddess is also called like a mother goddess. She is the mother goddess of the land. And so when I think that's also part of like the mother wounding that she's exposing there, because he never knew his mother. This is not his land. He's trying to be king consort, dragon king, whatever. He's trying to claim the title for himself versus the title being bestowed upon him by the sovereignty goddess. Okay, so if we consider Alice being that individual who could bestow that title upon him, then of course she's going to demand an initiation process from him, but also some sort of like, she has to assess if he's even the right man for the job. And when she sees under his command, the Bracken lands and Stonehenge and these places being desecrated under his command, then she has to question herself, is this the right man for the job? So I think those places are all sort of in her domain, and that's why she can hear the voices of the people who live on that land, because it's her land. And like, the Hollow Hills kind of vibe. So yeah, I kind of think that's like the thing with Alice. Like, we're like, who is she? She's the witch queen of Harrenhal. She's, this sort of mysterious witchy lady, but really what it comes down to, and going back to her being associated with purple being a color that is for royalty, for the emperor, for the high priestess of, the Eleusinian mysteries, for example. Clearly she is a woman who holds a lot of power. One other goddess that came to mind with Alice and with her saying that she is a barn owl was the Cailleach, which we didn't really talk about last week, but the Cailleach is also in Celtic mythology, in Scottish and Irish mythology. She is the embodiment of winter. Okay, so this could be significant. Potentially. So the Kaliak is an old woman goddess. She presents as an old, ancient woman. She's very ugly. She's the embodiment of winter. And so when she comes, she brings the winter with her. She has this staff that she walks with, an old gnarly wooden staff that is said when her staff hits the ground, it turns to ice and snow. And she also has an owl that sits on her staff, and that's like her animal. And owls in general, they are associated with a lot of like death and bad omens, and like in indigenous cultures as well, like if there's an owl, like you cover the eyes, they can be associated with bad omens. And so as like the Kaliak herself, she's kind of basically, okay, if you're familiar with like the Oak King and the Holly King myth, where it's like a summer king and winter king, and the same goes for the Kaliak. She's the winter queen versus Brigid, who is her spring counterpart. She is the spring queen, the queen of May, and all of that. And she's also an Irish goddess who is a hearth goddess and like associated with like music and all of this. So anyway, so the Kaliak is like an old woman versus Brigid, who is like a young spring maiden. So there is potentially the idea that Alice could be associated with the Kaliak because the Kaliak is associated with winter and the winter stuff. And so Damon potentially facing like, this once and future king, or the prince that was promised sort of prophecy, and fulfilling it, you have to wonder, like, is this woman a sort of, what's the right word I'm trying to think of? The antithetical, or not, I can't think of the right word, but, the anti that. It's the opposite. Like, she is associated with winter, with darkness, and she brings the winter, versus Damon and the prince that was promised, who bring fire. They're the light bringer and that kind of thing to combat the long night. So if Alice is potentially the owl of the Kaliak, is she some sort of harbinger of winter, or someone who knows something more? It's just an idea. I feel like she's more associated with Blodeuwedd and that kind of myth versus the Kaliak myth, but I thought I would present all options to us and see if we might talk something out here and see what we can figure out. It's just an idea, but all right, let me catch up with the chat. Yes. So Kaliak, found in Gaelic myths, often called the old hag. Yes. I made a video about the Kaliak like years ago, it's one of my older videos. So if you guys want to learn more about her, because she is a figure in certain Arthurian myths, like Morgan Le Fay is strongly associated with the Kaliak. So, and Morgan Le Fay is also strongly associated with Alice Rivers. So there is a connection there. There is something there. Okay. Mother Nature herself. Exactly. It's entirely possible. And that's kind of a big thing about like the Kaliak cycle, Kaliak Brigid cycle. All right. I love talking mythology as well, Wild Marjoram. I'm so happy to be here with you guys every week and kind of just spew my mythological stuff. And hopefully you guys can do with it what you will. Harrenhal must stink, It probably doesn't smell great. I've had those thoughts too. I'm like, what's the mold situation at Harrenhal? Like, yeah. Oh, Mandolin, are you here? Girl. This girl, she's just elusive as Alice Rivers. I don't know. She was supposed to come on here. So everybody tell Mandy to come be on the stream next week. All right. So Athena's symbol is an owl, and that's more about intelligence than being spooky. Yes. So I don't really, there is like the owl is associated with Athena, and we definitely know that from Yellow Jackets mythology. But I don't really feel like Alice is associated with Athena. Yes, she may have that like very knowledgeable sort of ancient wisdom aspect to her. But I feel like Alice is more associated with like death and that sort of energy versus Athena, who is a warrior, and she is the goddess of knowledge and wisdom and that kind of thing. There might be like hints and like overtones and that kind of thing, but yeah, I agree. I think she's kind of, it's not necessarily that myth. The Hag of Bira, yes, I read that poem in my Kaliak video. And she is a crone aspect, right? She's like an ugly old woman. She's even associated with like the what's the myth called? I don't know, but it has to do with Gawain. And she tries to like basically trick him to fall in love. Oh, I wonder if we'll get to see this. Oh, maybe we'll get to see this on the show. Maybe Gawain goes to Harrenhal with Kristen, because Aemond and Kristen, they go to Harrenhal and Alice messes with them. She like drives a wedge between the two of them with her potions and filters, as they say. And I would love to see Gawain get in the mix on that if they include the myth of it's the wife of Bath or something like that. Something like that. But basically it's about it's the old woman. She's trying to convince Gawain to give her a kiss. And if he kisses her, then she transforms into a beautiful woman. And then it's like his wife kind of thing, but she's like cursed to be in the body of an old hag or what have you. God, why can't I think of it? Maybe it's the wife of Bath or something. I don't know. Anyways, whatever. I talk about it in the Kaliak video. It's been a long time since it's been like 3 years since I made that video. So anyhow, Baba Yaga, similar figure. Baba Yaga is definitely, yeah, with the bird association, actually. Yeah, the chicken legs in the house. Yeah, interesting. Isis is sometimes shown as with the head of an owl. Interesting. Yeah. I put a lot of Isis energy on Alicent, to be real. But that could tie into like the mother wounding that these men share, right? So, okay. All right. Well, I think that kind of wraps it up. Thanks, Mandy. I know yeah, I was kind of flowing, but we pretty much have most of the things covered for this week. Canterbury Tale. Yeah, who said it? I saw it while I was scrolling. Canterbury Tale, the wife of Bath. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's about Gawain and the Kaliak, or like the old woman of Bira or whatever. And it's a good story. It's funny. It's interesting. I would like to see if they include that with Gawain, because I'm loving the Gawain Kristen dynamic. We even see more of that in this episode when they're like, parading the head through town. It's like, again, Gawain, he is embodying like the honorable Gawain from Arthurian mythology. So there's usually this duality to Gawain and Lancelot's dynamic. One of them is like the honorable, good knight who's loyal to Arthur, versus the other one who becomes berserker, battle hardened kind of thing, that change that goes on amongst them. And so this happens in a lot of Arthurian legends between Gawain and Lancelot, and they kind of switch back and forth depending on the legend. And it's usually one of them will be the good honorable knight. If it's Lancelot that's the good honorable knight, then Gawain is like a brutish, like he's violent and takes advantage of what he's a womanizer and all of this. But it's the other way around. When it's Gawain who is the honorable, loyal knight, then it's Lancelot who's sort of this emotional, like vain, kind of entitled individual, usually like a prince of France or what have you. He will have this sort of entitlement compared to Arthur, right? So I love that they're kind of exposing or playing with that dynamic with the two of them. And then perhaps we'll take it to another level with the Canterbury Tale if he ends up going to Harrenhal. I would love that. This is my own personal like nerding out situation. Hey, thank you. Thanks for the super chat, Emma. And if you have any questions or anything like that, drop it in. Let's see. Oh, we've got some Hecate conversation going on. Let's see. I get more Hecate vibes than Athena. Hecate is the mother of all magic. Good point. Yes. Mm-hmm. Alice may be associated with Hecate, goddess of magic and necromancy. I like that. I like that to go along with, because there is sort of an amalgamation of like Celtic mythology, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, just all these different myths that are like intermixed in this Dance of the Dragons sort of inspiration. And it's, you know, and I will give credit to the writers of the show because they are the ones, you know, very much so including a lot of this structure into the show. Like, yeah, Fire and Blood is fantastic and I've read it a bunch of times, but I don't necessarily, and I bet that George had a lot of these themes in mind as he's writing it, but the way that Fire and Blood is written, as you know, being written by the maesters and septons and that kind of thing, I don't think he can necessarily get into as much of that mythology, like playing with the mythology versus them just writing this account of it. So then the showrunners have done an excellent job of kind of getting in, digging into that, and then bringing more of that to the forefront, exposing that relationship with Damon and Aemond and how it kind of does connect back to Egyptian mythology and Horus and Set. Or how Alicent's behavior, you know, the 7-pointed star, we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I'm seeing so much of that where she does have this Isis aspect. She's the healer, she's the mother, but she's also like this sensual, like Ishtar individual where she's embracing her sexuality and things like that she's kept suppressed for so long. And she's just getting to be such an interesting character. Every episode, she's just becoming more and more like rich. Yeah. So, okay. Well, you guys, I think, yes, intermythed. Yes, hashtag intermythed. Yeah, Alice looks like Maiden Mother Crone all in one. Very true. Oh, yes. Did you? Do you think there was some reference I missed when they joked about the bat guano? Guano. You know I was laughing about that. If there's any like cheap jokes, like, yes, I will laugh at them. Sorry, I am a child. Okay. Lair Strong, maybe the prince that was promised. Yes, indeed. He's just got to outlast, out strong. I don't know. Owls are associated with seeing in the dark, i.e. intelligence of an esoteric nature. Interesting that you mentioned that, especially when they say that about Rhaenys, how she could see in the dark. And then we have this additional layer of she's claiming Alyssa's dragon, and then Damon's having the dream about Alyssa. Like, this, it wasn't just, it just so happens. Like, they definitely planned these layers, but you have to wonder if perhaps the death of Meleys somehow exposed some sort of like portal or energy kind of thing that perhaps Alice was able to play upon, you know. I don't know, that's just an idea, but there is something there. Like, yeah, Rhaenys claiming Meleys in this way that's so connected to Daemon in particular, which is also reflective of Aemon's own claiming his own drag. Like, it's just, there's so layered, right? I love it. So, all right. Well, I think that's about it, guys. I think I'm going to wrap it up for this week. Kind of a shorter stream, but hey, there's nothing wrong with that. But thank you all so much for being here. Don't people harvest bat guano from caves? Yeah, it's actually a great fertilizer, I'm pretty sure. I wouldn't know, but maybe I should try. But thank you all for being here. We will be back next week with episode 6 to discuss episode 6. And if you haven't checked out my latest videos, definitely do so. I did a little recap from the live stream with Alice Rivers stuff last week, but we also have the Eye for an Eye video and just some other great stuff linked down below in the description here. So definitely check it out if you need something to watch after the stream ends. And I appreciate all of you guys, and we will see you next week. And hopefully Mandolin will be back here with me. But we'll see. Fingers crossed. But all right, you guys, appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.